All right. Good to go.
All right. So I'll just go ahead and kick us off. This is the City Council Oversight Committee meeting for Thursday, August 13th. We have two items on the agenda today. The first is a presentation regarding Vote 16 Norman by Norman's very own Elliot Kmetz. So I'm sure that he has a presentation. We'll be doing some screen sharing. Elliot, I'm sure that this was a very interesting way to get involved in local politics. And I know you've caught a lot of feedback about this already, but we are really looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Elliot, I will just say, if you could please go ahead and email me that presentation to the city clerk so that I will have it for the record.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you.
All right. So am I good to go?
Yes, you are.
Awesome. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Awesome. Great. So Vote 16 Norman is a presentation, well, is an initiative to lower the voting age to 16 in municipal elections. And so our vision is twofold, and they're not codependent, our two parts. So the first is, of course, lowering the voting age, but the second is an educational component. So we're working with Norman Public Schools to actually expand civics education. So that educational component is really important to us. And so beyond working with just Norman Public Schools, we'd like to work with private schools and homeschools in Norman on this issue. So we are actually scheduled to meet with the curriculum team at Norman Public Schools in the near future. And we really hope to expand civics education in Norman. So you might ask yourself the question, why do we need to lower the voting age? And the reason is because of voter participation. In Norman, voter turnout is very low. So in the 2019 mayoral election, we did not even crack 20% of registered voters. And in some council elections, we didn't even crack 10%. So we clearly have an issue with voter participation, and this is a quick way to solve it. So lowering the voting age would easily improve the issue of low voter turnout, because voting is habitual, and the sooner a Normanite submits their first ballot, the more likely they are to vote later on. In fact, most estimates say that you're most likely 25% to vote in the next election if you voted in the previous one. And 16 and 17-year-olds are ready to vote. So the reason we say that 16 and 17-year-olds are ready to vote, because we did a survey of more than 650 students across the Norman Public Schools district. So we reached out to students from Norman High School, Norman North High School, and the Dimensions Academy in Norman Public Schools to make sure that we represented everybody across the district. So we asked 3 questions, the first of which was, do you support lowering the voting age? And a huge majority came out and said that they did. So 76% supported lowering the voting age. Our second question was, do you intend to vote in local elections? So if given the right to vote, would you? And for that, we were really blown away by the intention of young people. So just almost 90% of respondents said that they intended to vote in the next local election if given the opportunity, which is just amazing. And then in summary, the Norman Vote 16 survey indicated that young people, 1, support lowering the voting age to 16, that 2, they intend to vote if given the opportunity. And finally, we asked a third question, which was, what local issues are you concerned with? And so they showed broad interest in school funding and affordable housing issues, and substantial interest in quality of life projects, taxes, and voting rights. So after we answer the question that 16 and 17-year-olds really want to vote, we have to ask ourselves, why do they want to vote? And why is 16 a better age to vote than 18? So the first answer is mental preparedness. 16-year-olds are mentally ready to vote. So there's a brain function called cold cognition, which has been widely said to be linked to unhurried and logical decision-making, which is exactly what you need to make a responsible vote. There's also empirical data from around the world to support that. So if we look to Austria and countries, many countries in Europe and South America and really around the world, we can see that 16-year-olds vote independently and of their own free will. So what's the difference between a 16-year-old voting and an 18-year-old? Well, a 16-year-old has a vast support network to make sure that they cast their first vote, whereas an 18-year-old is venturing out into the unknown. So 16-year-olds are still in a strong community support network that most likely they've been in their entire lives. Norman Public Schools, I've been in this district for the last 7 years of my life. And so I really know that I have a strong community around me. In addition, 16-year-olds have a strong family connection. I'm not going off to college yet, and I've lived with my family my whole life. And finally, 16-year-olds are still entrenched in their community. So, whereas 18-year-olds are transitioning into the workplace or higher education, sometimes thousands of miles away from anyone they've ever known. They're venturing into a new community, they're going to a new school, and they're separated from their family probably for the first times in their lives. So there's very clearly a major difference between 16-year-olds having that support network when they cast their first ballot versus 18-year-olds who are on their own and really have a struggle with casting that first ballot. Next, I'd like to talk about how 16 and 17-year-olds are actually equal constituents in Norman. So 16 and 17-year-olds should be treated as equal constituents because we do many of the same activities that legal adults do. I pay taxes on everything I buy at the store. I can drive, and I can also work without limits. So, and in addition, in some cases, 16 and 17-year-olds are tried in adult courts. So when we ask ourselves, what's the difference between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old? There's really very little between them. In addition, youth have a much more vested interest in school bond issues and other school-related issues. 16 and 17-year-olds are directly affected by every decision that the school board makes, and yet they can't even vote. So now I'd like to talk about some previous campaigns by Vote 16 from in America. So Tacoma Park, Maryland, lowered the voting age to 16 in 2013 for municipal elections. This was a major step in the right direction. So two main takeaways from this was that voter turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds was incredibly high compared to the general population. If you look to the graph to our right, the first election that came with the lower voting turnout, the lower voting age, 16, 17-year-olds voted at more than 4 times the rate of the general population, which is just incredible. And then secondly, voter turnout doubled in the next scheduled election. This suggests that by allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, other residents were encouraged to vote. So when we look at this, we can see that a family aspect is being brought out. 16 and 17-year-olds are bringing out their family to come support them as they take that first ballot. And it's going to increase the voting turnout, not among just 16 and 17-year-olds and young people, but among all demographics, as our community goes out to support 16 and 17-year-olds and young people as they cast their first crucial ballot. So that was my presentation on Vote 16. We'd love if you would contact us. To everybody who's watching from YouTube, this is my contact information, and we'd love to answer any questions or comments you might have. Now, if the council has questions, we'd love to answer those.
I'm sure we do. I will actually start that. I have a couple of questions. Do you know how many high school students there are in Norman? I'm trying to compare the responses that you got to this survey with kind of the overall high school population. Do you happen to know that?
Yeah. So we did one feeler answer. We sent out one email to students from across the district. So each principal just sent out a singular email. Mm-hmm. And we had a turnout of more than 16%. So of the high school, which is just incredible. And it shows just how involved and how big of an issue this is to young people.
Well, and that's already a statistically significant percentage of the population when it comes to running a poll. So I'm happy to see that. It just kind of helps me put that into context. Do you have any sense in I don't know if Tacoma Park is the only U.S. Example that we have to look at. Do they allow voting in their school board elections as well?
Yeah, so they absolutely do. And actually, allowing voting in school board elections is even more popular than voting in municipal elections in general.
I can imagine.
So Berkeley, California actually lowered the voting age to 16 for school board elections only. And that was a big step in the right direction. Actually, a ton of towns in Maryland have lowered the voting age. Tacoma Park was just the first, and so that's usually why we use it as an example.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions I have for right now. Councilmember Holman.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, Elliot. I really appreciate all the work that you've done on this. Very detailed. And so in these other cities and places where they have changed the voting age, do you have some information about how that was done? Was it done through a petition process? Was it done through the city council or the school board in maybe that case, or a county supervisor? A lot of different types of governments all around the country. So just maybe some background on how they went about making these changes in some of these communities.
Absolutely. So I know for many of the cities in Maryland and California as well, they did charter amendments. So we're actually in the process of our charter review commission looking at our charter. So that's really perfect timing, because that's exactly how you would go about lowering the voting age.
Okay. And is there any research done about voting persuasion of 16 to 17-year-olds? I've heard several comments, you've probably seen them as well, that criticisms that if we let 16, 17-year-olds vote, they're only going to vote for one particular ideology or one party. I don't agree with that. I think 16 and 17-year-olds are perfectly capable of deciding what they think about these issues and candidates they might want to support. But I've heard that, and I don't know of any particular evidence that I've seen that shows that high school students are more or less likely to vote for someone over someone else.
Yeah. So to respond to that, I think we should look at voting empirical evidence from around the world. So in 16 and 17-year-olds in Austria who have the right to vote for national elections, which is a really major step, they did a survey and they looked at, they gave them first, they asked them what they supported, and then they checked to see if they actually had written in on their ballot for candidates who supported the same issues. And they found that in a huge majority, they did, and that they were making educated, responsible decisions. And I think we're going to see that in America as well.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Again, I really appreciate this. And we've talked a lot, and many people comment about the lack of civics education in any level of school. And really, when you start talking about local government, you showed the percentage of voters that I get here in Ward 7. My ward is historically the lowest voting turnout of all the wards, going back decades. And most of the OU students do live in my ward, that live on campus. And a lot of them will even register to vote, but then for whatever reasons are not motivated to vote in those local city council or school board type elections. And I think you really hit on some things I really hadn't thought of about, why 16 and 17-year-olds would be more likely to vote in local elections compared to 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds. Because if you're still in high school and you're still living with your family in your hometown, you still got that connection. And I think that's probably one of the most impactful points that I was able to take away from what you presented. So thank you very much. I will let others ask their questions.
Councilmember Hall.
Well, first of all, I would just like to say thank you, Elliot, for your insightful and thorough presentation. It has really been my pleasure to start this conversation with you way back in March. And it's been so interesting for me to learn about this advocacy effort that has been well underway in certain communities across the United States. And I think you pointed out that Tacoma, Washington has had experience with this since 2013, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Okay. Well, so just a couple of comments, and then I do have a question. I just have been so inspired really by your grassroots advocacy and your interest in this topic. And this was all happening while we were all at home and you were experiencing distance learning at your high school. So could you talk a little bit more about when you did the survey and having a result like you did at 16% participation? I believe you all were practicing distance learning at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, so the circumstances of the survey were actually very weird. We were distance learning, nobody was in school. And so I think a lot of the people in the school community were really not involved. And so to have that very large turnout for just having sent out a single email is just incredible, especially when I think the community was really divided and not really involved.
Well, I remember one of our conversations was shortly after you had conducted your survey. And I found it really compelling that that many of your fellow students chose to participate with one outreach and one contact. And so you didn't even really have the benefit of word of mouth or speaking about this through classes at school. This was strictly an outreach effort through email to get your fellow students to participate. So I think that makes it even more impressive at the kind of turnout that you got. One of the things that we discussed early on was the particular interest that I had in how you connected this with civics education in high school. And you did briefly touch on that, but could you expand on that just a little bit of what you're envisioning and what kinds of things that are on your list to discuss with the curriculum committee when you meet them, of linking this privilege and responsibility of voting and how that would connect with improved civics education in the high school setting?
Absolutely. So I think a major point of this, and really it might even be more important than lowering the voting age, is the expansion of civics education, because that is truly what's going to increase voter participation in Norman. Lowering the voting age will help, of course, but really civics education just does so much. And right now, civics education is only taught in 12th grade for a single semester. And that's really not enough. So we're meeting with the curriculum team at the end of this month, and hopefully we can persuade them to expand civics education from the high school all the way down to the middle school. I mean, we can start as early as possible and really expand on how much education these young people receive. Then we're going to have a much higher voter turnout in the years to come and generations to come.
And do you currently have any kind of voter registration drives for those that are 18 and in high school? How does that work currently?
So I know the League of Women Voters does a lot of work with voter registration drives. So we actually haven't done anything like that because we haven't been in school. This campaign really started at the end of the last school year when we were all socially distanced, and it's only progressed over this summer. So I'm sure that will expand into making sure that people register to vote. But right now, and I know from my experience at the high school, my teachers made sure that people registered to vote. Miss Laughlin, who is my AP US history teacher and a really big person in our community, she made sure that every day there were registration forms at the edge of her door. So I think it's a really big issue in the school community, and people are definitely advocating for it.
And for those that aren't really familiar with your story, could you give us a little bit of background on how you got interested in this in the first place?
Yeah. I went on a YMCA trip because I'm involved within the YMCA's program called Youth in Government. So that's a really awesome program that teaches young people about state leadership and state government. And then they also have programs where you can go learn about national government. So I went on a youth advocacy trip to DC, where I was chosen to be one of 2 youth advocates from Oklahoma to advocate for the YMCA's issues. So something really great about that is I learned and I got to see a presentation about Vote 16. And when I heard that idea, I was kind of awestruck because I'd never heard it before. And to hear that it had been done in the United States, that it was possible in my home state of Oklahoma, I really just fell in love with the idea that we could make a change and that we could involve young people in the government process.
I know you're also going to be starting the school year in the virtual environment once again, but I've just wondered what your plans are as far as continuing to promote this idea with your fellow students.
Absolutely. So right now I'm kind of trying to create an advisory council. So Amelia Backus and Keaton, who are on this call, are a part of that. And that's really about expanding this beyond just me to making sure that our community and the school is involved. So I'm hoping to create a club at Norman High School to make sure that more people can be involved.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you did a great job today.
So Elliot, I want to just kind of jump in and say, kind of regardless of what happens with this particular effort, I hope that you continue to pursue expanded civic education in high school. I was someone who took every government class that my high school had to offer. You know, we had Introduction to Government, which was our civics requirement, which was the only one that was required of me. And then I actually took AP Government twice. The second time it didn't count for much, but I wanted to take it again anyway. And then I actually went to American University and got a degree in political science and did not connect myself to local politics in the community that I lived in right after college, which was Norman, until 6 years after I moved here. And it was because I walked into our animal shelter and went, oh God, I have to do something about this. And then found out that there was a big effort to do something about it. And I wanted to get more involved. So even someone like myself who took a lot of government and political science classes in high school, majored in it in college, there was not any kind of emphasis on local government. And so I really do hope that you continue to pursue some of the policies included in this entire package, regardless of whether or not you're successful in getting our city charter changed, because I think that a number of the things that you've touched on are still really important factors in encouraging 16 and 17-year-olds to become more involved in city government and in the decisions that impact them. Because local government is the most responsive form of government. You pull my number off of the city's website and it's my cell phone number. So, you know, it's really reinforcing participating in local government. So I do hope that you continue to pursue some of this kind of regardless of the outcome. I do want to pitch it over to City Attorney Catherine Walker for a couple minutes to kind of talk about what, if any, paths forward there are for this topic.
Sure, and thank you, Elliot and team. This is a new area for me to research, so that was interesting. And you know what our charter says right now, which is kind of the first thing that would have to be changed, is that qualifications of voters include those who are qualified and registered under the law of the state of Oklahoma. And so the Oklahoma Constitution in Article 3, Section 1 says all citizens who live in the state who are over 18 years old are qualified electors. And then the election statutes that the election board follows brings in similar language and just says only qualified electors are entitled to be registered voters. So I called the state election board and said, what would you say if we had this proposal? And essentially what they said is, you know, we're only set up to accept voter registration from 18 and over. So if you wanted to run your own elections, and you all may not know this, but The election board actually runs all of our elections. We don't do any of it. They accept the voter registration. They accept the candidate filings. They run the polling places, all of that. And so they basically said, you could do it, but we wouldn't be running those things for you. We don't have a system in place because of that constitutional provision to accept voters under 18. So that would probably be the biggest hurdle. I would say that's a pretty big undertaking to run our own elections. We've talked about it before, but we've not done that. So it'd be a charter change, I think, for qualifications of voters, but I think it would also be some changes related to that would have to be adopted before we could move forward.
Catherine, can I pose a hypothetical to you?
Sure.
So let's say that Elliot is successful in getting the charter changed. Would it be feasible to have local voter registration cards? So something, a fairly simple application, you bring it in to Brenda, I guess, with your driver's license or a birth certificate, and you get a laminated, nice sealed card that is a City of Norman voter card, youth voter card, as an example. Lists that could then be supplied to the county workers for local elections. And so we're taking on the administrative responsibility of registering these students to vote. And then we are providing the information to the election board for election day.
I don't know that the election board would accept that. There's some interesting case law out there when there was a difference between the federal minimum age for voting and the state minimum age. And oh my gosh, do we have to accept the federal age limit? Well, yeah, you do, because it's the federal government. But I don't think they would accept this. I think what they really think would happen would be we would set up our own system, including elections.
Could I jump in here?
Yes.
Because I've done a little research, and Tacoma Park, Maryland, what they did is they did have their own city registration, and then they just had like a separate table for youth to vote. And so it wasn't a major hurdle for them. They really just had, you would register with the city and then go vote as normal. And it was just a very minor inconvenience and not a huge issue.
So 16 to 18 would register to vote with the city, but then they would go vote at the same polling places as the county, and
Yeah.
the city would just be set up at different. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting.
I'm not sure that the county would allow us to share precincts. I mean, that's certainly something we could check into. But if that were the case, it would almost probably have to be that they all had to come, say, to City Hall and vote instead of voting at precincts. But I mean, that's something we could check into.
Or mail-in. We could do mail-in only.
It would just be a matter of getting certified election results, combining our counts with their counts, and that's where they may have some issue, I think. But that's something we can ask. I have a really good contact now at the state election board thanks to this project. I'm certainly happy to call them and ask those questions and kind of get some hypothetical situations to them and get some feedback.
Well, and Elliot, I will say that we have an even more contemporary example of how you could go about and get a charter change that didn't, you don't have to go through city council. I mean, of course you can, but there is also the initiative process that you can go through in order to get this changed. And I imagine that if there are a couple thousand high school students, then multiply by maybe 1.5 for parents, there's a lot of room to get signatures there. So I feel like you have multiple tracks to work on this with. Have you spoken with the chair of our charter review commission, Midway Bob Thompson?
I have. Actually, he was the first person I spoke to when discussing this, because I actually didn't know that he was the chair of the Charter Review Commission He was just Midway Bob, and he was down the street. So I just reached out to him, and because I knew he was a former council member, so I asked him, with his local election knowledge, like, do you think this is feasible? And I asked him a whole bunch of questions, and so he seemed really supportive, and he answered all of my questions. So, and he also mentioned that yes, the Charter Review Commission could see this after the City Council sent it their way.
Because I do think that there is a chance to generate additional community buy-in on this if it is done, even with, let's say, the blessing of the Charter Review Commission, by doing it through the initiative process. That gives you an opportunity to go out and, speak to members of the community and make the case in order to get it on a ballot. And I think it improves your chances of success. Because if it's done through the city council process, there is going to be ample opportunity for people to claim that city council members don't know what the community wants. They're pandering to their own self-interest. Any of the numerous comments that I know you have been also subjected to online in the public discussions about this on social media. Doing it via the initiative process makes it a much more bulletproof case for the public, because if you can generate 3,200 signatures to get this on a ballot, that is more than twice the number of people that tend to vote in city council elections. So, I think that there's a lot to consider here. I certainly think that this is something that if we bring to the entire council body, I don't think that there would be much opposition to sending it to charter review. From there is when things get political and, maybe a little dicey. So, I think that there's a very valid next step to take in terms of bringing this to a city council study session and talking about it as a full body, and then kind of I don't see much in the way of opposition in having the Charter Review Commission look at it, and then from there you can talk, with your team, and we can talk as a council body about whether or not this is something that could use the additional community buy-in of doing it through the initiative process. But I really appreciate your presentation. I considered myself to be fairly woke politically when I was in high school, and I never would have considered petitioning my city to allow me to engage earlier than I was legally allowed to do. So I'm really proud of this effort. I do want to give your colleagues an opportunity to speak if they have anything that they would like to add or say or ask. No pressure, guys. If you don't really have much to say, don't feel obligated to speak. But if either Amelia or Keaton have anything that they would like to add, I want to give you the opportunity to do that.
I might add something. You were talking about how there needs to be a slightly more distinctive community support for Vote 16. And it does have to do much more with high school students. But from what I can tell, most of my peers are very supportive of this. And there are issues that they are directly associated with that they can't have any input on, and they have very little control over. And it actually damages their own education to not be able to speak and have input. I have several friends who are on 504s that are very subpar to what they need to actually be successful. And being able to change some of that with the school board and actually have topic of discussion with that would be very helpful to a lot of people. And other than that, there's a lot that young people would like to be involved in but can't because they are not 18. And I don't think that it should be a limiting factor of how much you can be involved in your community.
I completely agree with you. I don't disagree with you one bit. My worry though is that you're going to have to be asking adults to give you that right, and doing it through an initiative process, in my opinion, just makes your case that much stronger, because you can then say, look, we got twice as many people to support this as voted in the last municipal election. And it makes it much harder to push back against, just based on the feedback that I've seen on social media, which I'm sure is not representative of the whole community.
Right. I would say that there are thousands of eligible voters in Norman who would be willing to participate and would be willing to vote and help bring up the community that simply can't because they are not old enough. And it's a little bit frustrating, I would say, but I think that it has a very positive message that just needs to be more defined and educated more.
I agree with you 100%. Keaton, do you have anything you'd like to add? Or Amelia, if you weren't done, I'm so sorry. Did you have more?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keaton, you're muted.
You're muted. There you go.
Uh-oh.
Oh, and now he froze.
Let's give him a second. See.
Yep. I think our citywide internet infrastructure is stressed right now. Keaton, you're unmuted. I see you talking, but I cannot hear you.
Try it now, Keaton. No, let me see if I can do something over here. Oops. It shows you're not muted, but go ahead and try to talk again. No, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, Keaton. I mean, you can always feel free to, email us with any thoughts that you may have, or call or text. We're always available for you. Brenda, did you get any emails? I got some emails with some public comment, but some of them were kind of wrapped into each other. So
The only ones that I got are not related to this topic.
okay. I got one. I'm going to read just the bottom piece from Sarah Wormker's email because it's about this. And then Keaton, if you want to send something in the chat, I can, either I or Amelia or Elliot can read it out for you. Do you want me to read this public comment, Brenda?
I think I might have it too. I didn't get that far down in her.
It's at the
Okay.
very bottom.
Okay. This is from Sarah Wormker, and she is a resident of Ward 4. And she says, I would also like to express my excitement that the city is hearing the Vote 16 initiative. I think including 16 and 17-year-olds in municipal decisions that they are directly impacted by would be a great move for Norman. 16-year-olds are deemed old enough to be licensed drivers on our public roads and to be employees in our businesses. So I think it makes a lot of sense to put this initiative on the ballot in the upcoming election.
Thanks, Sarah. Councilmember Holman, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just briefly, and some of you have seen me post about it, and I talked about it during council meeting the other night, that, when I was 16 and a student at Norman High, I worked every weekend and some weeknights at the now abandoned, defunct Perfect Swings Family Fun Center off Highway 9, running the go-karts and bumper boats for over 2 years. Most of my time in high school, that's where I worked. And I paid sales tax to the city when I bought stuff using the paycheck that I earned. And income tax was taken out of that paycheck to go to the state as well. So in a city where we're completely reliant on sales tax revenue for operations, for police and fire and things like that, there is definitely an argument about taxation and representation and things like that. So I am definitely interested to know more and learn more about this. And I would like for the rest of the council to take a look and decide if we want to have the charter review give us some recommendations on it as well. Thank you.
And so to be kind of exceedingly clear, I'll say that to you, Keaton, and to Amelia and to Elliot, that that will be our next step, is asking for a study session so that the council as a complete body can talk about this. As you can see, we don't have all council members here today. We typically don't have all council members at any of our committee meetings. So we will work to schedule this for a study session at some point in the not too distant future. And hopefully by then we can get some additional feedback from the county election board and from maybe the state election board if we need some additional feedback on, if this were to pass, how it would be structured. Because that's certainly something we would want to try and hammer out before we brought it to charter review and before it ever ended up on a ballot for public vote. If the study session goes well, the way we get things on the Charter Review Commission's task list is to amend the resolution that established that committee and got it active again. There may or may not be other things that recent events have caused us to want to possibly look at some charter changes for. So we know that the Charter Review Commission will be continuing to work. And so the earliest opportunity we could probably get something even to charter review would be towards the end of September, in order to give us time to have a study session about this and then amend the resolution to get it to charter review, just to give you guys a sense of what the timeline looks like, because I know that that's not always clear when we say we want to get something on a study session and then get it to charter review. And then, of course, you would present at charter review, they'd have a discussion, and then they will make a recommendation on how they think city council should proceed with that. And again, even if city council decides that this is not something that they want to take on through the council body, there is the initiative petition process, which I always encourage anyone to go through that process at least once, and to see how that goes. It is a lengthy process and it requires a lot of individual conversations, but it's also a really great way to increase the amount of community support for something before it gets on a ballot. Councilmember Hall.
Yes, I just wanted to also say that I am in support of taking that next step to a study session. I also wanted to mention that I believe Elliot has examples of draft ordinance language, so he might possibly be able to work with our legal counsel, Ms. Walker, and provide some information for her along those lines, because I know he's done some work in that area as well.
Sounds great. Elliot, do you have any closing comments that you would like to share?
Yes. I just want to say thank you so much to all the members of the council here today, and all the ones who are not here, who are in support of this, and all the members of the community who have really helped us to get this far. And a special thanks to Lee Hall. You've really kind of started this initiative, and I really want to thank you for all the work you've done.
It's been my pleasure, Elliot.
All right, Keaton, we don't want to close off this topic, and if you've got something that you want to add, so if you can give me a thumbs up if you're typing, or shake your head if you're good. You got something?
I think he's typing.
All right, we'll give you another minute to type out. Elliot or Amelia, you're welcome to read those out to us. I'm going to put him on the spot. Matt, you got anything you want to add? Councilmember Peacock?
I was just going to ask, what's the threshold for signatures to get an initiative petition started?
Well, we sure know what that is right now.
Currently, it's based off of the last citywide mayoral election. It requires 25% of the votes cast in that election. So that would be our 2019 mayoral election, and that number is 3,265.
The reason I bring that up is I actually went and looked at the census data, and there are approximately 6,000 16 to 18-year-olds in Norman. So I think you might have.
That's a lot of parents. That's a lot of parents to be able to get signatures from.
Really?
So I about that process. Do they all have to be legal registered voters, or can anybody sign the petition?
No, they do have to be legal electors, what the state calls electors or registered voters. It is a lengthy process. There are a lot of legal steps that you have to go through. And it certainly can be challenged on many different things if you don't have everything just perfect. So you would certainly want to, if someone that you know in your friend group or family is an attorney that could help you all draft that. I mean, we are not allowed to help you do that, but we certainly are here to answer questions if you have some. We just can't give you advice on how to do that.
And there are people in this community who have run petitions themselves or been involved in petitions, and so I am sure that any number of them, whether they're connected to a student at one of the schools or not, would be happy to help you out. So there would be a lot of community support for helping ensure that you start off on the right foot and therefore can, end without much in the way of substantive challenge.
Great. I'd like to read what Keaton wrote in the chat. So he said, I don't have much to add, but I will expand on the last thing that Amelia had said about thousands of young people that would like to get involved but don't have a say. A lot of the stereotypical problems with teenagers are not caused by us not caring, but by us not feeling like anything we say really matters. I can't speak for everyone, but I myself and a few of my friends have a lot to say, but by the feeling that nothing we say will make a difference, I think that lowering the voting age would not only increase the overall voter turnout, but encourage young people to get more involved in their communities in a variety of ways. Thanks, Keaton.
Thanks, Keaton. Sorry you were having some technical difficulties there, but I'm glad we were able to drag it out long enough to get your feedback in. And I think that there are a lot of hidden and invisible ways that this kind of an effort would support and assist high schoolers in how they have to exist in their communities now and really empower them for the future. I don't think it's necessarily just about being able to vote, although that's a large part, but just feeling like you have a way to make a difference in your community in this way. So we will keep you updated on the date that we are able to schedule a study session for. I can't tell you that right now because I don't know that Brenda has the tentative schedule right in front of her. But we will work to get this on a full study session at some point in the not too distant future. Think we can do it in the next 30 days, Brenda?
Most likely, yes. Well, I know we can't do it in August because all of our Tuesdays are covered for the rest of the month, but we could likely get it on a study session the first part of September.
Okay. And so we will, of course, keep you up to date on that because we will have you make this presentation to the full council. And then we'll talk about kind of next steps. I'm hopeful that City Attorney Catherine Walker can maybe have some additional details from the state and the county about what possible way we would be able to implement this. And then we'll, then it'll kind of move on to charter review, and then we can kind of go from there and see what the next step would be. But Brenda has your email address, and so when we do get it scheduled, she'll make sure that you know what date that
Absolutely.
is. And it'll be in a virtual setting like this. So if Amelia and Keaton, if you want to be a part of that when it does come up, or others, if you want to rotate in and out, that's totally fine. But we're really looking forward to talking about this as a full council body, because I can't imagine how differently my high school career would have gone if I had been able to vote at the same time that I was able to do all the other adult things that I was allowed to do when I turned 16. So thank you all very much. And we look forward to talking about this as a full body.
Thank you so much for meeting with us.
Thank you guys. And we're sorry that this is, I know that this is just kind of an odd format to have these kinds of discussions. But we're really happy to be continuing to move on this. And thank you so much for bringing it to us and giving us an opportunity to consider it. You're welcome to stay and talk about our unarmed community intervention program if you'd like, since it does also have an impact on the youth of our community as well. But if not, I will not be offended if you guys want to leave and go about your day.
I just want to say thank you so much in final, and thank you to all the members of the council who are here today in support of this.
Thank you, guys. All right, we are going to move on to item 2, discussion to determine the best ways to reach marginalized communities to discuss an unarmed community intervention program. And so what this is related to is the Community Reserve Fund that we have set aside to develop an unarmed community intervention team. We know that this will largely support those in marginalized communities who don't typically feel connected to local city government. And so what I want to talk about today is how do we reach them? It's difficult enough in a non-pandemic setting and made even more complicated and difficult in today's situation. So typically, we do the online community survey, some kind of a Google form that we throw up on the city website and that all council members share. My concern with that is that there are a large number of Norman residents, as we know from the fact that we have such low participation in our city council elections, that are not plugged into City Hall on social media. They don't follow their city council member on Facebook. I know that I'm not necessarily a part of every single HOA or neighborhood group on social media. So how do we reach people who don't historically connect with the city? Because there are some times that I feel like we're in a little bit of an echo chamber. The people who are connected all the time are the ones who are always connected, and the ones who are disconnected tend to remain disconnected. So just to kind of seed some ideas with you all, I was looking at ideas like establishing a Google Voice phone number that someone can call in and provide feedback just in a voicemail. Google Voice will transcribe that, which can then be emailed out to anyone that you'd like. And then to pair into that, I was hoping to see some kind of a form that could be filled out. Thanks, Matt. Bye, Matt. A form that could be filled out, and then if to eliminate the need for return postage, if it says at the bottom, take a photo of this page and text it to this Google Voice number, we have ways, I'm more than happy, and I know that there are many members of this community that would be happy to disseminate pieces of paper to individual doorsteps, particularly in the lowest income census blocks in the city, to ensure that we are reaching people who don't typically connect with City Hall. Then, of course, we could do the typical Zoom listening sessions, or have, in-person conversation events at city parks or somewhere that we can be safe in a pandemic setting. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that because, as I have said in previous meetings, I don't think it's appropriate to create a non-traditional culture-changing program in a traditional way. And so I really feel like the creation of this unique and different program needs to be as unique and different as the program intends to be. So I'm going to throw it out to you all for your thoughts on that. Don't everyone jump all at once.
Looks like you have to go first, Stephen.
Councilmember Holman.
Yeah.
He unmuted before Lee put up her hand.
I mean, I do like that idea a lot. Just trying to come up with any ways that people can get their thoughts to us that aren't on social media. That I'm really trying to think about people that don't have internet. How can they contact City Hall? How do they find out who their city council members are? How do they find out any information if they don't have that stuff? And how we had talked about trying to go out to them, and that's even more difficult given the situation. We talked about maybe the rec centers or some sort of outdoor setting like what we're doing with the bond meetings at the parks, that type of stuff, because I do think that in many ways we are going to have to go to these parts of town or wherever people are. We're going to have to go to them. But having something like the phone is it a Google phone number? Is that what you?
Yeah, it's a Google Voice phone number that can be accessed online by any of us, can be accessed by city staff.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, especially if it's able to transcribe it out and send it an email to us. That would be very helpful, and it could definitely help staff when it comes to fielding calls that are intended for us directly, stuff like that. So, yeah, I like kind of where we're headed on that, and kind of looking to see what some others might have some to add to that as well.
Sure. Councilmember Hall. Thanks, Stephen.
I'm intrigued with the Google phone number. I don't have a lot of familiarity with how that would work, but I think that's definitely worth pursuing. But I share that same concern about all things that are connected to internet access and how we. I think it's fine to use that as a avenue, but I also think we really need to get creative about other ways to reach out. So, the issue with inviting people to parks and things like that is, well, how do we actually get the word out about that? Flyers door to door. I think that the power of a piece of paper is still a useful tool, and that's where help with organizing neighborhoods and reaching out to what kind of constituent groups may be helpful in disseminating that kind of information. And I think we talked about that a little bit at the last meeting of identifying places that people that we don't normally hear from find a place to congregate, or a place that could be an outreach location, which of course is also challenged by where we find ourselves with the pandemic. So I wish I had some other creative solutions, but I do think it needs to be a multi-pronged approach, and we can't just be dependent on some type of internet access to accomplish that.
I agree. And that was really the big sticking point, is we know that there are a lot of people who don't have consistent internet access.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons why I latched on to the Google Voice idea is because not everyone has internet access, but almost everyone has a phone.
That's a phone, yeah.
And even if their phone doesn't have a whole lot of data that they can use, texting and phone calls are free now, more or less. So if you have any kind of working phone, you have the ability to call a phone number, you have the ability to text. And so that's one of the things that I liked so much about the Google Voice idea, is that it's something that can be set up with at least broad enough access for city staff and for council members. And if we had a way to disseminate flyers that had a questionnaire on the back, as an example, they could drop that off at City Hall. They could take a photo of it and text it to this Google Voice number. They could call the phone number and read off their feedback or read off their answers. And so it provides a way for them to give feedback without it relying on internet access. The big question is, how do you get this flyer into their hands? And in my opinion, that would rely a lot on the interested parties that have been participating in this process throughout. I know there are a lot of individuals in the community who would be happy to spend an hour or two just walking door to door and putting this leaflet kind of on doors. And so, that's certainly the lowest tech, most time intensive way to do it, but it also ensures that we are reaching the people that we most need to hear from. There are any number of ways that people with regular internet access could fill out kind of the typical Google form that we tend to use for these kinds of things, because it's not that I don't want feedback from everyone. I want feedback from everyone. I just want to ensure that we have feedback from these types of groups that tend to be most impacted by these issues. And those are not the people who tend to be the fastest to respond to our city's requests for input. So, I certainly didn't expect to have any kind of answers today. I just wanted to kind of start that conversation, and then also ask what kinds of input or feedback would we be looking for? And how do we potentially phrase some of these questions to get that kind of feedback? Because it was actually by talking with one of my constituents just at the gas station, who mentioned to me the fear that a lot of people have in trying to file a complaint about NPD with NPD. And that simply eliminating that hurdle by having complaints be able to be directed to another department within the city, like we talked about, the city attorney's office or HR, would eliminate that hurdle and allow people to feel more comfortable speaking out when they feel that there's something to speak out about. And I would never have thought about that if it hadn't been for a conversation with a constituent to kind of bring me to that perspective and start looking at these issues from the perspective of someone who maybe hasn't had great interactions with the police and therefore doesn't feel comfortable filing a complaint with the department that they're complaining about. So I don't know if you all maybe had any thoughts or any guidance on what you would like to see us ask of the community when it comes to developing a program, because I personally think mental health is the way to go, or this unarmed community intervention team. But depending on what questions we ask, we might get completely different feedback and want us to go in a completely different direction. Councilmember Holman, I don't know if you unmuted in order to answer this or if you had been muted all along. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, I did not unmute myself.
Oh, okay. Because that was really kind of my thought, is that the way we ask these questions or what we ask could influence the kind of feedback we get. And so I just want to be sure to be as broad as we can, while also not being so broad that we end up with feedback all over the map and can't really find the median line through all of that. Lee unmuted first. You got something, Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, I guess my initial response to that is I'm not sure that I can presume that I know the right questions to ask. And so it would be, again, a process of identifying members of our community with some of the interactions that you've had and, you know, some of the other just responses or feedback that we've had along the way. But it just seems important that it's not dependent on us crafting the questions as much as it is feedback of what those questions need to be and how we go about doing that. That's my first thought.
That's fair. I'm making notes that sounds like we'll start reaching out to you know, maybe NC4RJ, some of the nonprofits that work with a lot of these communities. Frankly, reach out to Food and Shelter, and kind of maybe get a sense of what kinds of things we should be asking those who maybe are unhoused. And that was something I really wanted to get in touch with Food and Shelter about, how we address, how can we get feedback from our homeless population about maybe what they would like to see in terms of, you know, how we handle interactions with homeless individuals. So, you know, I think it would be good to ask some of these different entities what kinds of questions, or how can we structure questions to get the best kind of feedback from the populations that they serve.
If I may suggest, there is also a community mental health mobile response unit that might be helpful for that population. That's already responding to mental health situations. And so that might be a group you want to tap into.
Community Mental Health Task Force?
Response unit, mobile response unit, I think it's called. I'll have to check with Carrie Bryant to get the right name, but that's a group of providers from a number of agencies, I think, that will go out and do mental health, you know, evaluations on site now to assist the police. And so they might have a good idea of how to reach that segment of the community.
I agree with that as well, Lee. And just like the schools too, all 4 of the middle schools have mean, maybe more so at Longfellow and Irving, but even Alcott and Whittier have very low income children that go there and families, who are in those districts. And if there's some way to work with the schools and sure to be able to reach the parents of kids at schools like Kennedy and Madison and Irving and Longfellow and but really all of them, I think there's where we could find a lot of people that are not being heard from on city issues at all.
Mm-hmm.
They might be involved in the public school stuff to a certain extent, but probably not if they're really low income, if they're marginalized communities in Norman. They're probably not very involved in school board elections or voting, probably not involved in that type of stuff, and probably not in city council decisions. But if we could find a way to, through the schools, I'm not sure, so they can know,
Yeah.
this is who we are and how can we help you. I don't know.
I don't know the current guidance counselor at Irving Middle School, but I did know one of their former guidance counselors. And honestly, I think actually the guidance counseling program is going to be the way to get the most direct feedback. My worry about talking to the board or the PTA is that the parents that tend to be involved in school board and PTA also tend to not be the parents who are most directly, or the parents of children who are most directly affected by these issues. But the guidance counselors tend to know those parents very well. It's the guidance counselors that have all the extra snacks and socks and underwear in their offices. The ones who distribute the weekend backpacks for students who need supplemental nutrition. So that might be a way to go. Because I was also thinking about Peach Jar, the digital replacement for the Thursday folder. But it costs money. I'd be curious if the city has any kind of a partnership with Norman Public Schools to be able to post city information at a reduced or no cost to Peach Jar. Because I know when I did it for Annie's for the kids camp, it was very expensive. But that's a way to reach, again, some parents. Peach Jar. So it's
what is this?
Sorry. It's the digital version of the Thursday folders. So they stopped doing the Thursday folders and they started posting all of the flyers or the camp, the one-page camp announcements on Peach Jar. But it's like $50 a school. And so if you're trying to get every elementary, middle, and high school in Norman, that cost adds up. I would love to see a partnership with Norman Public Schools to be able to put city information on Peach Jar for not that rate.
So did they allow you to do, at that one point in time, years ago, anyway, the Thursday folders, they wouldn't really allow outside stuff coming in because they wanted it to focus on the school information, and then they didn't want their stuff to get lost in it. So you saying they let you put the ad on or whatever about the Annie's camp?
Yeah, for the dog walking camp, they allowed us to do that. It went through a review and apparently they approved it.
I would imagine our youth sports are probably being posted on that then, because I know
I'd imagine so.
For youth sports.
That used to one of the things that they did allow in the Thursday folders when they still had paper folders that they would take from the city was the rec program. So they would still allow them to put stuff in there for that.
Maybe we have a partnership already. I don't know.
Yeah,
it could be.
Well, I can talk to Judd about that and see if we still have some kind of a partnership in that area, because if we do, I'm sure it would be a lot easier to build off of that than to try and start something from scratch. But yeah, I will ask actually the former guidance counselor at Irving if she knows or if she has any relationship with the current guidance counselor, because I think that would be a really great way to get some feedback from that community. And so, I really do think we have to kind of take a multi-pronged approach, as Councilmember Hall said, in order to get the widest range of feedback, which, like I said, I still really want. But I really want to ensure that we are being diligent and intentional in making sure that we have feedback from the communities that tend to be most affected by these issues. It's a program for everyone. Everyone has equal access, just like they do the police department. But for this particular program, it will certainly impact some populations more than others. So making sure that we're heading in the right direction and addressing the right concerns and having the right priorities is really going to require some intentional time and effort on our part. Maybe this is for Brenda, maybe this is for Catherine. When it comes to, let's say we really do end up deciding that having to do some kind of direct outreach, in the terms of leaflets or flyers or inserts, what, if any, leeway do we have to use the city's system for that?
When you say the city system, you're talking about the
Yeah, printing and maybe getting something in an insert in a utility bill, or anything like that, to kind of eliminate the cost of printing if we're going to be having to use volunteers to disseminate it. Just trying to address that side of it.
I don't see
I've never
why.
asked before, so I've never had to do or feel like I needed to do any kind of direct outreach to get input. So that's just why I'm asking, because I've never had to do that before.
If it was something that council wanted, an avenue they wanted to use to get input on certain issues, certainly it could be used. I mean, we use it for other purposes of education and information, transferring information.
Okay.
We are limited to those that actually are on city utilities, obviously, but that would cover, all of urban Norman.
Okay. Then I'd like to at least keep that in consideration for Councilmember Hall and Councilmember Holman, that, I feel like that would be a fair, if we were able to avoid return postage or anything like that by having it be linked to a Google Voice number, so they could snap a photo of it, text it in, drop it off at City Hall, call it in, then, I think that a one-time insert in a utility bill would certainly get some really wide coverage. And then, then we could focus on getting that input back, and making sure that we have some feedback from different areas of our community. So I think that would be a viable possibility, and I would love to see us exercise that for more than just bond votes. We always put something in a utility bill when we want someone to vote to take money out of their own pocket. But for something like this, I think that would be a viable way to get some feedback. I imagine, Brenda, that would be something that would not just be able to come from a consensus of the Oversight Committee, that we would need to take a formal action, or?
I don't know that would be necessary. Let me visit with the city manager about it. And yeah, I don't think it would require any kind of major formal action, but it's just one avenue we have to reach people.
Right. And yeah, and that would go along with, a Google form that could be shared. I'm sure that the city has never set up a Google Voice before. But but I personally love it. It's that's the 405 number that I have, is a Google Voice number that is connected to my phone, which also means that I can go onto the website at any time and pull the transcripts from my voicemails and more easily email voicemails out. It's a really flexible system, and I really like it. So I'm happy to work with you, Brenda, on getting that set up if that's the direction we decide to go.
Thank you.
All right. So does anyone have any other feedback about this? We're limited to 6:15 because of Planning Commission. I certainly didn't expect this part of the conversation to take all that long. Just wanted to start the conversation about what we talk about, how we get input, and so we can kind of move from there. And I feel like we could probably craft something offline. I don't think that we need to go into the details of what we're going to ask, or how we're going to phrase it. I'm sure that that's something that we can kind of work on just as a committee. But that's pretty much all I've got. I see NPD on here. I want to give them an opportunity to weigh in. No pressure. I can't see you, so I don't know if this.
I believe it's Deputy Chief Ricky Jackson.
Hi, Ricky Jackson. Do you have any insight on this, or any input that you can share, maybe about the mobile response unit and what feedback they might be able to provide?
mobile response unit in which capacity? I'm sorry, I stepped away to take care of the business and I stepped back.
I'm sorry,
So
it was the mental health mobile response unit. We're trying to get some feedback on what a community program could look like. Try and make sure that we reach the marginalized communities that tend to be pretty disconnected from City Hall. And Catherine suggested that we might reach out to the mental health mobile response unit and get some feedback on that kind of thing.
As a matter of fact, you know, a couple of years ago, when I was the commander over the operations, which included our USD Uniform Support Division, I proffered a suggestion of our CIT folks partnering with our mental health partners to further reach out into our community to help serve those in that community that are marginalized through mental health and substance abuse and things of that nature. So we're working on a proposal on doing just that. So I think that's it's a wonderful idea. It's something that, again, we worked on for a number of years. We identified a need in our community to have something like this. So anything that's mobile, where we get out amongst the people and our constituents to help them go through whatever crisis they're going through, I'm all for it. I think it's a noble concept, a noble idea. It's something we've looked at for a couple of years. The problem, of course, was budgeting and staffing and trying to develop a team that can do that. The person I had placed ahead of that to spearhead this program was, of course, our CIT guru, Kerry Bryant, you know, and with his connections in the mental health community, that was something that we was very seriously considering doing. As far as the mobile aspect of it, we've also looking at another program to where we do partner with those in our mental health partners. And what I mean by partnering with them, we're instituting a program where we obtain laptops to help us go into the field so we can more readily render service through a mutual laptop. So, and this is something, again, this part of it just started a few days ago. And Kerry Bryant proffered it to me. So I was in the infancy of us looking at that to see exactly if it's something we can do. So we're constantly reaching out amongst the people here at the police department to try to identify different programs where we can continue that type of service. So I'm all for something like that. I think it's a great program to try to get instituted. Don't know if I answered the question right. Like I said, I was in and out.
It does in some ways and not in others. And just the way I would respond to that is I'd love to keep you involved as we kind of develop the questions, because what the knowledge that you have, which is knowledge that no individual in this community will have, is how many mental health calls you receive every single year and what types of calls. I mean, any individual can give their own anecdotal feedback of the calls that they have been a party to or their friends and family may have been. But you have kind of that much greater breadth of understanding of the different types of mental health calls, and then maybe what direction, even within the mental health world, a new program should aim to address. So, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot now. You don't have to answer now.
No. Well, it's fun. It's funny you should say this, because we are in the process. And a week ago, I requested some numbers from USD, Uniform Support Division, in particular with Kerry Bryant. And my main question was this, because Norman is the CAT Center for mental health. You know, people come to Norman or dropped off in Norman, in some cases dumped in Norman, because they know we're a CAT Center. We provide service to people in our community or outside of our community that's in mental health crisis, and we will take them in and we would do a variety of things to assist them in whatever issues that they're going through. So I requested that we pull information. I was curious to know how many people in this community that we serve. And it's a daunting task, because there's lots of different criteria we look for. We pull it up through our CAD system to try to identify the exact numbers, because things are coded differently. So we're working on streamlining that coding. But I was interested in knowing how many contacts we have, and because of these contacts, the number of people that we're actually able to render assistance. I know this is it's not publicized very often, But on this end, I see a lot of this occurring with our officers in the field. I know we have a little bit of time. So I don't want to hurry and rush through this. So I guess I can get this out to you guys. One of the things that I know as of late is that we have people in crisis that are armed and suicidal. And I know the mantra across the country is that police officers, when they run across someone in crisis, the first thing we do is shoot them. That's not the case in Norman. Norman, we obtain and treat more mental health consumers here in Norman and get them help than any other city in this particular region because of the CAT Center of Griffin and Red Rock. And so with all of those contacts, with all of these individuals, the majority of them we're able to disarm, to help them and get them the help that they need. We do this over and over and over again. I used to send out the emails that would explain certain situations, thus even got the names because we can't violate confidentiality, but we would send you guys emails on just the various situations where we encounter people that have mental health crisis and they're armed. We disarm them, we get them help. And this is mainly due because of the training that we do. Do you realize that one of our strategic goals was to certify all of our employees, civilian, commission, and CIT, crisis intervention team, they're all certified to be able to talk to people in crisis. I don't know any other police department that does that in the state, but we do that. And so because we understand the value of everyone in our community, and everybody in our community deserves to be helped. And so Norman's a forerunner of that. So we're constantly looking for ways to improve what we do to the people that we serve in our community, particularly those going through crisis, because they're the ones that get dropped off and put in, and forgotten about and discarded. And people think they see them as more of a nuisance than being really human beings, which is who they are. They're human beings, they're in crisis, and everyone has a life, everyone has a family, and they need to be deserve to be treated with respect. So our guys are educated. Like I said, I talk to guys across the country and I say, what are you guys doing to serve the guys in your people in your community? None of them have a program like this. None of them reach out. None of them are in the strategic goal is to be 100% CIT certified with every officer and commissioner in the police department. So a lot of that does not get out. It's not public knowledge, but I am so proud of what we do and how we do it. Again, and I will continue to push, and so is the chief, these programs to help serve up the people in our community. So I don't know if I answered that, but it's just interesting we're having this conversation, and just in the last either few years or the last few weeks, we're pulling numbers, we're trying to assess how best we can serve the people in our community, and that's something we continue to do on a daily basis. It'll be a little harder with fewer officers, but we try to do what we can to try to continue to provide that type of service.
Right. No, and I really appreciate that. And whenever you do kind of get some fairly detailed breakdowns, especially of those mental health calls, would you share them with us?
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Most
I appreciate that, because it'll really help us get a better sense and be able to wrap our heads around, really some additional details about the types of calls that our officers handle.
Sure.
I saw a couple hands
more than
pop
happy
up.
to help out.
Thank you. Councilmember Holman and then Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Is it the major or deputy chief now? Is it?
It's major.
Okay, still major. Okay.
Still major,
Well,
yes, sir.
I appreciate that. And if I recall from a conversation we had, I don't know, a while back, I think you've been with the department almost as long as I've been alive, right? You've been with Norman PD since the 80s.
Been here for a little while, yes, sir.
Yeah. Are you the longest tenured
yes,
person?
sir, I am. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. So from that perspective, I just really appreciate you being on here with us, because I think, the department has resources as a whole, of course, but you really have the longevity and experience being in the Norman community to know who are the people we're trying to reach here that the city doesn't, the police department, we're not able to serve as well as we should as a whole. And I think you, of all people in the department, have the most knowledge and experience in Norman specifically. And so I was glad and excited to see you on the call with us, because I think you're the right person specifically to help.
I'm more than happy to be here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you, Major, too, for being in this meeting today. So I really appreciated the comments that you had, and I realized that you had a long tenure, but I didn't realize it was that you're the longest tenured officer with our police department. So that's also good to know. I was just curious, and you may not know this off the top of your head, but you said the goal was to have 100% of your employees CIT trained. I was just curious if you know how many have already had the opportunity to complete that training at this point.
The last time we pulled that information, roughly, was about a year ago. We were at like 37%. And the way that we were able to push it forward, we started processing and pushing the same program through our academy, so that people are at least exposed to it in the academy first, and they'll all hear it in the academy. And then, you know, the actual certification process for to become CIT certified is actually a 40-hour course. And we've looked at ways of trying to shorten it, to get people out, but more certified, quicker. But it all boils down to they have to do the 40-hour course, because there's so many components to the training that they have to have that to be able to really be certified to deal with those going through crisis. And so that's why it takes so long. And we only have X amount of CIT trainings a year, you know, and so we have to squeeze them in where we can. But we have found that by at least introducing them to the concept in the academy that they know, and then when they get out on the street, we have to, again, reintroduce them to them, because in the academy, things aren't really relevant till you actually start doing it. And so we've got kind of a two-tier approach to make sure they get that information. And I'm just amazed every time I get emails from officers and division commanders, and they'll tell me about individuals that are in crisis that are armed. We had a couple last week. One guy was in his house home with a machete. Another at OU campus had a shotgun to his head. And we worked in partnership with OU and talked this individual down, got the shotgun from him and got him some help, you know. And so every week I hear these stories, you know, and I'm just amazed at the level of professionalism these guys have when they reach out to these individuals in the community. So I'm just stoked. I'm happy to be in the position I am now. I am overtraining. So that means that I have a direct input on what we do and how we do it. The cultural changes that we've implemented over the last 10 years, being in this position, I'm able to continue that process and make sure the guys get the type of training they need to have to understand how to deal with those marginalized in our community. That's what I'm passionate about, you know, and sometimes, you know, it's a difficult chore, because it's very difficult to reprogram people about how they were taught and how they raised. It's difficult to reprogram them and tell them that, hey, some of the things you've learned over the years is not entirely correct. I want you to consider these things as possibilities. And so I am just, like I said, stoked in that the reception that I've gotten in my diversity, as another, we just started a diversity and equity team, you know, and that team's main role is to educate the officers and also be a liaison between our officers and people in our community that are marginalized. So I'm really excited about this diversity team that we started up. All of this was going on long before the defunding and all of that. You know, these things have been planned. We're constantly moving forward to try to figure out ways to improve what we do and improve service to people in our community. So I don't know if you guys get a chance to hear a lot of that from this end. I'll be more than happy to share with you some of the emails that I received sitting in this chair, and as I was a major over staff services, discussing and talking about these situations that these officers come in contact with pretty much on a daily basis. And instead of across the country, and people are ending up shooting and killing people that are going through crisis, Norman's saving people and getting them help. So you won't see our names in the paper, you know, that a guy came out with or whatever, and we ended up shooting them. No, you know, and some of these things that I read that my guys are doing, I'm just amazed. I wonder if I would have had the mental mindset and the emotional intelligence and maturity to respond to some of these calls the way they're doing it at the ages that they are and the level of training that they have. I'm just amazed at what these guys are able to do. So I would like to exchange and send that information more if you guys are interested in that. When we have these types of situations, I'll be more than happy to forward you that information. And of course, I have to redact the names because on the mental health, their people are protected. They want to violate their rights. But I would like you guys to see exactly what we're doing pretty much on a daily or weekly basis.
I mean, feel free to send them
Yeah.
daily. That's great.
I will
with
do
me.
that.
One question quickly,
I'd
Lee,
be
before
happy to, oh, I'm sorry. I
just
gonna
wanted
say-
to clarify on the CIT. Is that 40 hours a year, or is that 40 hours one and done, and they don't take it again?
No,
Sorry.
well, we have in our in-service, we always cover some component of mental health. We have to for CLEAT requirements. But the 40 hours is the big chunk. That's the one where everybody gets certified at CIT for the CIT team, you know, and then, you know, we get refreshers throughout, you know, the year and in-service and other times.
Okay,
Because
so but there's no
we're
continuing education requirement for that. There's no continuing education requirement for that. Once they're certified, they're certified forever.
They're certified, and the continuing education is provided each year during in-service, because we're required to have X amount of hours of mental health training for our people. So it may not be in the form of the actual CIT, but it's some form of mental health. It could be substance addiction, it could be a variety of things, but we get mental health, and that's mandated by the state. But normally we do we do more than what the state gives. The CLEAT is the basic stuff that you get. You know, their academies are like a third the length of our, we have 26-week academies, 26-week academies. You know, CLEAT something like 4 or 5 weeks. That's basic. But we go above and beyond.
Appreciate that. Sorry, Councilmember Hall. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted some clarification on that before we move too far past it.
Yeah, and I had just a couple of follow-up questions too, but I'm really again glad that you're a part of this call, because this is all really useful information. And yes, please share whatever you feel comfortable sharing with us. I'm always interested in receiving that kind of information. So on the CIT training, is that an in-house program that the Norman Police Department has developed, or is that a program that is, you know, something that you've adopted from a more
yes
type of training program?
We adopted that from a national template.
Okay.
You know, and so as a matter of fact, you know, we work with partnership with Oklahoma City, and they send instructors, and we send our instructors to help them certify people with CIT. And so, you know, we either host a CIT training, or we'll attend a CIT training where we're helping. We do that about twice a year. Again, it's a 40-hour week, and getting people, a lot of folks off for 40 hours, you know, in this day and time is kind of difficult. So you don't have them like once a month, you know. We get them like twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. We'll have CIT training to certify new CIT folks. So, you know, because it's so involved, that it's just not something we can do every month, you know. But we are one of the, because of Kerry Bryant, we are one of the main proponents, it's late today, so my mind's kind of going. We're involved in this a lot across the state. Our name's well known across the state in our CIT training.
Okay, so yeah, I thought it was a national program, but I just wanted to make sure that that was a correct understanding. So the other thing you mentioned is the diversity and equity team, and how long has that been in existence?
Well, we're working in the process of starting that now. Right now we have 11 members, and we have 15. We'll have 15 individuals that's part of this, and this diversity and equity team is made up of a very diverse group of folks here at the police department. You know, I mean, all walks of life, you name it, they're on this team. And the reason how this kind of came about is that, you know, I've been a big push about educating people about to have an open mind, to try to understand the lives and the footsteps of others, what it's like to be in the shoes of other people who aren't particularly from your particular culture. We all have different issues and stuff. And so everybody that knows me knows that every chance you get, if we're talking and you make a comment that I think may be a little bit politically incorrect, then you're gonna come in Rick Jackson's office and I got a chair in this corner. We sit down, we have these conversations. And so there's a number of people here that know this is how I roll. And so these guys got together and identified a need because they're closer to the troops. I'm a major, now deputy chief, but my lieutenants and my officers and some of my captains are closer to my troops. So they hear the feedback, they hear the questions. And so because of the questions we're getting about a variety of different things, this group decided that we needed a consistent message to give to our officers. So they're not getting one message from one guy and then someone else tells them something totally different. So it's a consistent message. So if you have a question, for instance, Councilmember Hall, and you say, hey, can you explain why so-and-so is so-and-so? Well, this diversity team member and equity member would then get that question, they'll take it back to the group, you know, and they will discuss the question and they will give a consistent answer back to this individual. You know, so they're not getting 4 or 5 different versions of everyone's different experiences. So, and that's what we do. And so also in the community, we have forums and panels to where people are curious about what we do and how we do it, and police and diversity, inclusive, everything we do. This is also the group that reaches out to those in the community, and we sit on these panels. I sit on a number of them. I've been on I don't know how many panels talking about what we do as a culture in law enforcement, but I'm in a unique position in that not only am I police 34 years, I'm a Black male in this country for 60. And so my life experiences are different from a lot of the younger folks that I work with here at the PD. So I'm constantly trying to educate them as to why we're perceived a certain way across the country, you know, and I gotta say to these guys' credit, they come in my office and they ask these questions. And that's what kind of fosters this diversity team. You know, instead of just getting lots of different, you know, this team will then take these answers, take these questions and provide a consistent answer. So I'm excited about it. It's in the infancy stage of it. I was excited to get as many people interested in the team, because it's very threatening to tell a person the things you've been taught your entire life, some of the things you've been taught is wrong, historically wrong, culturally wrong, and we're here to educate you and bring you up. So we all, when you know better, you do better. It's my mindset. So I'm excited about this team. And again, they're composed of everyone from every walk of life, from conservative to liberal to whatever you want to call. They're all on this team.
Okay, well,
I'm
thank you.
stoked about it.
I can tell. I really appreciate your passion about it. I do. And I'm happy to learn that this is something that you're initiating, and, you know, that obviously you are committed. So again, thank you for all of your input today. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the questions. I appreciate it.
I think I would add too, I think the diversity officer specifically was the reallocation of, basically we decided not to do an assistant city manager position.
Okay.
And are doing that from the way, if I understand it being the same thing that I'm thinking of, was Daryl kind of maybe had some help, but decided not to go with an assistant city manager position, and
Do that instead, yeah.
was yeah, I guess we felt this was more needed than an assistant city manager position. So I appreciate Norman Police Department for being receptive to that, and for Daryl for you know, continuing to do his job without having to take on another very expensive assistant position in that office. So I think this is a much better use of that particular resource. So
sure, I
just really appreciate it. City
manager has been very supportive with these ideas and concepts, you know, and I'm excited to have him here, because I like, we need to be there's a partnership. None of us can do this alone, you know, and I tell my guys, you know, we all have to show a unified front for a common cause. And the common cause is serving up people in our community. That's the #1 goal, regardless of what, how you, the #1 goal is providing exemplary service to those in our community. And we have a lot of guys committed to doing that. And so, like I said, I'm excited for this new position and this new position in my life, this new track in my life. You know, it gives me a bigger voice when I talk to these guys. You know, it gives me a bigger voice in improving certain things that we need to help improve this culture. It gives me a bigger voice when I start from the cadets, from the application process, and start identifying folks who espouse our values and our morals, you know, and not, you know, and we identify those that don't have those, you know, before we hire them, because you got to get them before they come into the police department. By the time they get here and go through training, if you don't identify those type of deficiencies in people, you know, now you hire them, then you got a problem, because it's a hard, as you guys know, we talked about complaints and all that. It's hard to get rid of them once they're in here. All right. So the key now is to catch them before they get in. And that's what I'm working on now. I'm working on developing the bias identification test, and working with our psychologist that hires our people. They do the MMPI and those psychological tests, but they're not capturing the biases. And I want to capture the bias before they get here. That way they don't come in and corrupt the rest of the guys. You know, I've been here 34 years, man, and I've been doing this my entire career, you know, and I'm here to tell you, I'm not willing to ride off into the sunset and let all that hard work go out the window because we're hiring bad people. And so I am ecstatic with the fact that for the last 10 years, we have had leadership here that understands that concept. We've been moving toward identifying people before we hire them. Are we 100% perfect? No, you're gonna still get folks in that can beat whatever, but it's not from lack of trying. Not from lack of trying. You gotta get them before they get into the academy.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that, and that is something that I would love to tackle at some point in the future. You know, I think that there are, as you kind of alluded to, that there are tests that are much kind of easier to see the right answer for than others. And you know, things like the Stanford Blink test, you know, which it requires very rapid answers to each question. It doesn't give your brain time to process what the correct answer should be. You have to answer and move on.
Most of those tests are that way. Most of those tests are designed, you can't think about it. Harvard's got a series of tests that does just that as well. You can't think about it. You got to answer within a few seconds, you know, because your first response is what they want to capture.
Yep.
So, but we haven't been doing that. You know, we've been trying to do it through interviews and background, you know, but I think we're still missing that component, that identifying those biases. That's what changes culture. If we can get them from the start, man, that's what changes culture.
So, and first of all, I would just like to say that I hope I look as good as you when I turn 60, because I think my jaw almost hit the floor when you said that you were 60.
Well,
like, I'm sorry, I don't need to
I know you'll feel a lot better than me because everything hurts. I did 15 years of defensive tactics instructor, and I was on the SWAT team. I'm telling you right now, every time I stand up, I groan. But thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I would love to kind of keep you involved as we start working on kind of what questions to pose to the community about what a community program with these reserve funds should look like. You know, I'd love to reach out to you and kind of get a sense from you of whether or not we're aiming the right way with these questions, or if there's some glaring error that we've forgotten to address. Because like I said, you probably have a better sense of all the various types of mental health calls that you go on, and would be able to maybe bring a broader perspective than all of the individual feedback that we'll be getting. So I'd love to keep you in the loop on that.
I'll be more than happy to help. And I got a team of folks willing to help too, man, 'cause that's what we do.
Great. So that's pretty much all I have for today. So before I pitch it over to Councilmember Hall and Councilmember Holman for any final comments, I'm sorry, Jane, I've seen you sitting down there for this entire meeting, and I feel bad that I haven't really had anything to ask you or have you weigh in on. But, you know, I just want to say that what we'll probably do in September is kind of put the finishing touches on whatever kind of community outreach we want to do and what it looks like and what it will say. So, you know, we'll kind of work on things behind the scenes, but we'll be sure to talk about it publicly before we kind of pull the trigger on everything. And then we'll probably circle back to some of the topics from August. Well, no, this is the August meeting. From the July meeting. And talk about kind of some of the other things we've got percolating out there, like addressing civil asset forfeiture, the neck holds, and you know some of the other policy proposals that were talked about in July. I haven't forgotten about them. Just wanted to kind of get this conversation rolling about what the community outreach part of this would look like. So now I will throw it over to Councilmember Hall and Councilmember Holman if they have any kind of closing comments before we wrap up and give Brenda a chance to deal with all the craziness I know has been happening behind the scenes before Planning Commission.
I don't have anything further to add. I just appreciate the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Appreciate the conversation and everybody who was part of the call today. So looking forward to working together to find some solutions. Thank you.
Great. And then Brenda, I didn't want to forget about this, and then I almost did. We had a few public comments for this agenda item.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were going to read those or not, since this wasn't the first introduction, but we only have a couple, I think.
Yeah, I think we've only got two, so.
Let me get back here to them. I hope I didn't unmark it. Okay, and let me go to Sarah's first, and then I'll have to find that other one.
Okay, the other one's from Taylor Gamble.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Okay. From Taylor Gamble, he lives, or she, or they live in Ward 1. Regarding the issue of reaching marginalized communities in Norman, I think that one course of action is to reach out to and involve their places of employment, because people's ability to communicate via email, text messages, or internet is going to be dependent on their access to those utilities. It seems to me that one of the great ways to reach out is to go to their places of work and to get these businesses to commit to being a proactive part of helping them engage in public local government. This would work by employers helping staff register to vote, educating the staff on what days are election days and what's on the ballot, educating them on when they are allowed to go to vote, being supportive of paid leave for voting where applicable, and encouraging all staff to go vote in each election. And then the rest of the message from Sarah Warmker is greatly appreciate your leadership in taking the first steps to establish an unarmed crisis response team for the city of Norman. I believe that programs like this will benefit everyone in our community by being safer and more cost-effective solutions for many emergency calls. So many people in our community are suffering under the constant stress of COVID-19, and the stress and uncertainty has put a huge amount of strain on our collective mental health. We have seen so much conflict and disagreement about what is the right way to respond to the crises we are facing. And that conflict has been very painful, both to those directly involved and for those witnessing conflicts on our public streets and on social media. It seems that the need for unarmed crisis responders is one of the few subjects that has broad community support, and to my knowledge, no opposition. And I hope that working together to make a program like this a reality could make Norman a stronger and more inclusive community. I hope that the city of Norman will take advantage of this opportunity to try new ways of reaching out to residents. I would especially like to see the city invest in broadening public access to Wi-Fi, especially for rural and low-income residents. Additionally, designing surveys that can be easily responded to using a text from a cell phone or a voicemail from a landline phone, a postcard in the mail, comments on social media, or simply fillable forms online could all be great ways to make participation more accessible. I would also like to see the city invest in disability services like sign language interpreters, closed captioning, and other services that make sure our differently abled residents are not denied access to participation in our local government. And I think that's all. Let me double check one more time. No, wait a minute. I think we might have had one more. From Alan Hatcher, Ward 8. I could see someone going door to door with a handheld audio recorder and giving people the opportunity to record statements like they'd like their council members to hear. This could be done every few weeks or so and could be done while maintaining social distancing. People would be free to remain anonymous too. This would show the city is making the effort to connect with the community rather than the city asking the community to put in the effort. And now that's all.
And I think what struck me about that last comment is something that I've been trying to figure out how we do, is not just require the community to come to us, but to figure out how to go to them. And I don't know that that's necessarily an easy process. I do agree that going door to door would be obviously the most direct way to get feedback from specific people. Also time consuming and limits the number of people that any of us could talk to in a given day. I don't think that any of these things are mutually exclusive though. It's not like going door to door with the handheld audio recorder would be in lieu of any of these other opportunities. But I think that that's something to keep in mind, is how do we ensure that we're not just asking the community to do all the work to provide us the feedback? How do we show them that we are interested enough in what they have to say that we will go to them too? And so that's all I have. Thank you all. You can always continue to email any of us with comments about how to proceed, especially for those who might be watching the video later. Our email addresses and our phone numbers are available on the website. If you call the number for me on the website, you get me. You don't get Brenda or an assistant or a voicemail. Well, sometimes you get a voicemail because I can't promise that I'll always answer, but you will get my voicemail. So please feel free to reach out. I will be sharing the link to this video on my Facebook page and on my award page. I will be monitoring those posts for comments as well. So continue to let us know how we can best reach out to the community and get feedback on what a program like this should look like. So, and then our next meeting will be September, no, not September. I just realized that I don't actually have the date right in front of me. September 10th. It'll be September 10th at 4 p.m.
I'm going to be here for a while. I've got to get ready for tomorrow.
All right, Brenda, I'll let she wants to go. So
No, I'm sorry. I thought I was muted.
It will be.
I was just talking to Ellen.
September 10th at 4 p.m. And I will post a summary of this meeting as well as agenda topics for next month's meeting, probably in a couple of weeks. So everyone have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Major Jackson, for all of your input. You will be hearing from me, and probably frequently. So thank you all. Have a
Good night,
good
everyone.
evening.
All right.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
Brenda,